I was ironing the shirt I meant to wear to my daughter's wedding when my phone lit up. Do not come. You are not welcome. You are not my family. The words sat on the screen like a cold hand on my throat. I stood in my small kitchen in Lakeview, steam hissing. The iron hovered over a blue sleeve I had pressed for school concerts. My name is Daniel Holt. I am 59. I fix furnaces and old water heaters and anything that rattles when winter comes. I kept this house after my wife died because our daughter grew up in these rooms. Nora learned to read at this table. She built a solar system from foam balls in the garage. I kept the planets on a shelf. I thought one day she would show them to her own kids. I read the message again. It did not blink or soften. Do not come. Not even a please. Not even a reason. I could hear her new world in that voice. The Whitakers, with their lake house and white walls. Her fiancé with perfect teeth and a job that fits inside a laptop. Invitations with my name printed small. Like a typo no one wanted to fix. My hands shook. I set the iron down and burned a crescent mark into the board. I pulled out the old box under the sink. It holds the list my wife wrote for Nora's 5th birthday. Apples. String lights. Paper crowns. My wife had neat handwriting. She taught Nora to thank the clerk. She taught her to call her grandmother on Sundays. She taught her to keep family close. I typed a reply and erased it. I tried again and erased that too. Please, sweetheart, let me stand in the back. I will clap when you say I do. I will not speak. I will be small. The words tasted like salt. I deleted them. I went to the window. Ice hung from the porch rail. The street was quiet. I pressed my palm to the glass until it fogged, like I could write a prayer on it and send it to her. The phone buzzed again. One more line. It is better this way. Dan. Call me after the honeymoon. Dan. Not Dad. The house went still in a way I had never heard before. Nora came into my house one evening, with the sharp click of her heels echoing across the old wooden floor. She didn't even take off her coat. She tossed her keys on the table like she owned the place, and stood there with her arms crossed. Dad, I need $30,000 for the wedding. Her tone wasn't asking. It was demanding. I put down the wrench I'd been using to fix the leaky faucet. 30,000. The number spun in my head. That was nearly everything I had in savings. The money your mother and I worked decades to put away. Nora, I can give you 8,000. It's all I can spare. Her face twisted as if I'd insulted her. 8,000? That's pathetic. She started pacing. Manicured nails tapping against her phone. Logan's parents already booked the venue. The flowers. The photographer. Everything is set. All you have to do is cover your part. I tried to explain. I told her about the medical bills after her mom passed. The mortgage. The pension check that barely stretched. She didn't want to hear it. Don't drag Mom into this, she snapped, knocking the papers from my hands. They scattered across the coffee table, sliding beneath the picture of her when she was 6 years old, holding a cake with pink frosting. The Whitakers say a real father would find a way. Mr. Whitaker sold one of his cars to pay for Logan's brother's wedding. Mrs. Whitaker pawned her jewelry. They told me family sacrifices when it matters. I'm not Mr. Whitaker, I said quietly. No, you're not, she hissed. You're just content with mediocrity. With this tiny house, this tiny life, this tiny future. Her words cut deeper than any blade. I looked down at the photograph of my late wife on the mantel. Her smile used to light this room. She taught Nora kindness. She taught her family loyalty. She died believing our daughter would never forget us. Do you know how humiliating it is when people ask about my father's contribution? Nora's voice cracked with anger. Do you know what it's like to tell them? My dad used to be somebody, but now he's nothing? That's what they say. And they're right. I held the photo frame tighter, my hands trembling. And what would your mother say if she heard you now? She didn't answer. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. You have 1 week. Dad. Figure it out. Because I'm not backing down. The slam shook the walls. I stood in the silence, surrounded by bills and broken memories, wondering how the little girl who once begged me to braid her hair could now look at me like I was a stranger. I thought the sting of her words would fade with time, but the ache only deepened. A few days later, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a half-empty cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Facebook. My thumb hesitated before I tapped. Nora Whitaker. That name struck me like a hammer. She had taken their last name before the wedding even happened. At the top of her post were the words that broke me again. Finally found my real family. Thank you, Richard and Elaine, for making dreams come true. Below the text were photos. In the first, she stood in a bridal shop, silk gown glowing under chandeliers. Elaine knelt behind her, fastening a veil with the care of a loving mother. Both women smiled as if they had known each other forever. In the second, Richard handed over a platinum credit card while clerks rushed to wrap packages. My daughter looked at him with an admiration I hadn't seen since she was a child, waiting for me to return from work. The third picture was the worst. The three of them posed together like a perfect family portrait. Nora in the middle, Richard's hand on her shoulder, Elaine holding both her hands, all three smiling as if they had built her life together. My chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. The comments poured in. Lucky parents. What a beautiful family. You deserve all the happiness. Not one mention of me. Not one acknowledgement of the man who raised her alone after her mother passed. Who cooked her breakfast every morning before school. Who worked nights fixing boilers just to pay for her college. I screenshotted everything. Years at the bank had taught me to document before emotion clouded judgment. I opened a new folder on my laptop. Nora. Evidence. My fingers shook on the keyboard, but I typed anyway. The house felt smaller than ever. The photos on the wall, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, high school graduation suddenly looked like artifacts of a life erased. My daughter had declared to the world that she had real parents now, and I was nothing but a shadow. The phone buzzed again. A message from Nora. Dad, did you see my post? The Whitakers wanted everyone to know how grateful I am for their real support. I'm still waiting for your answer about the money. I sat there for hours, reading the comments again and again, each like and heart-shaped reaction slicing into me. 200 likes, 100 comments. People celebrated her new family, while the father who gave her everything was erased in silence. The weight of betrayal pressed so heavy I felt my chest might split. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. In the end, I didn't write a word. I just closed the laptop and whispered into the empty room. When did I stop being enough? That night I left the laptop dark and washed the coffee cup by hand. I slow-dried it with a towel that still had my wife's initials stitched in one corner. The house creaked in the cold. A train passed far away. I could tell you I slept. I did not. Near midnight, my phone buzzed on the counter. I let it ring once. I let it ring twice. I picked it up on the third buzz with the same dread you use when you open an envelope that might hold bad news. There was no call. There was a text. It was from Nora. Do not come to the wedding. Security will have your name. You will not be allowed inside. Please do not embarrass me. I stared until the letters blurred. I sat down because my knees felt weak. I typed her name. I erased it. I read the message again. It was polite in the way a sign on a locked door is polite. It was final. A second message arrived before I found my breath. The father-daughter dance is handled. Richard will stand in. It makes more sense. He has been there for us. Father, daughter. A simple phrase that once meant a cheap gym, a paper banner, and a DJ who played the wrong songs. Nora had worn white sneakers under a pink dress. She kept stepping on my shoes, laughing, clutching my hand like she might fall if she let go. I had tied a ribbon in her hair. I had taped the paper banner to the wall with blue painter's tape because the school ran out of thumbtacks. Another buzz. I talked to the planner. Your chair is off the chart. There is no place for you. After the honeymoon we can talk. It is better this way. The floor seemed to tilt. I put the phone down and went to the hall closet. On the top shelf sits an old plastic tub with a cracked lid. It holds the little things that never found a proper frame. A seashell from the shore at Erie. A tiny mitten with a hole in the thumb. A ticket from the Science Museum with Nora's name scribbled in purple marker. I held the ticket and remembered how she once looked up at the stars in the planetarium and whispered that she could hear them sing. I carried the tub to the living room. I spread the contents on the rug. There was the letter she wrote me at 8 years old. Dear Dad, thank you for fixing the lamp so I can finish Charlotte's Web. You are so good at the world. I sat with that letter until my eyes burned. The phone lit again. Also, please stop commenting on my posts. Elaine says it upsets her mother. We are trying to keep things positive. People are watching. People are watching. I looked at the dark window. My reflection looked like a man twice my age. My wife used to tease me about my eyebrows when I frowned. She would smooth a thumb across my forehead and tell me to rest. I have not known how to rest since the day we lost her. I picked up the phone and typed too much. I told Nora about the time she had croup. I told her about the flat tire at the side of Route 8 inches the snow and how we sang carols to stay warm until the tow truck came. I told her the ribbon story and the planetarium song. I erased all of it. I typed a new line. I understand. I hit send and watched the tiny word delivered appear under my own words. A dot showed she was typing. The dot vanished. The dot returned. It vanished again. The screen went quiet. I turned off the kitchen light. I sat down on the floor beside the scattered memories. I tried to pray and could not find a single sentence that did not break apart. When the phone buzzed again, I flinched. One last message slid into view. Please do not contact Logan again. He is overwhelmed. We are moving forward as a family. I am a quiet man, but something inside me made a small sound then. Not a cry. Not a shout. Something low and raw. I pressed my hand to my chest to make sure my heart had not cracked open. I rose slowly and put every keepsake back into the tub. I closed the cracked lid. I stood the tub in the closet and closed the door like I was putting a child to bed. In the kitchen, the iron still sat on the board from earlier in the week. I plugged it in. I laid the blue shirt flat and moved the hot plate across the fabric, one careful inch at a time. I wanted at least one thing to be smooth. The phone lay face down by the sink. I did not turn it over. I knew what it would show. My name on a list at a door where I had once held my little girl's coat and blown on her fingers to warm them. A chair removed from a chart. A dance, already promised to a man who never stood in a school gym with blue tape on his hands. I pressed the collar and set the iron aside. I folded the shirt and set it on the chair. I washed my hands and dried them on the towel with my wife's initials. Then I sat in the dark and listened to the house breathe around me, like it was waiting to see what I would do next. I woke the next morning with the phone still face down on the counter. Sunlight crawled through the blinds, pale and unwelcome. My head ached from a night without rest. I poured coffee, but the taste was bitter, no matter how much sugar I stirred. Her words echoed in my chest. Not my family. A man can only bleed so long before something inside hardens. I stared at the framed picture above the mantel. The one of my wife holding Nora as a baby. Her smile seemed to ask what kind of father I would be now. I pulled open the drawer of my desk. Beneath old utility bills lay a leather-bound planner. Edges frayed from years at the bank. My fingers traced familiar pages. Names. Numbers. Contacts I hadn't called in decades. Among them was one name written in ink, darker than the rest. Samuel Price. Sam and I had once worked side by side. Where I saw spreadsheets, he saw trails. He left banking years ago and started his own investigative firm. At his farewell party, he shook my hand and said, "If you ever need the truth, call me." I hadn't thought I ever would. But that morning I did. My hands trembled as I dialed. When his voice answered, steady and calm, the years melted away. "Daniel? It's been too long. What brings you to me?" I hesitated. "How do you explain that your daughter has chosen strangers over you? That she has erased you with a line of text?" I swallowed hard. "I need information. Sam. About the Whitakers. About how they make their money. About who they really are." He was quiet for a beat. Then his voice turned businesslike. "I'll need details. Addresses. Business names. Anything you have. I can dig deep. But it'll cost you." Cost. The word stung after the week I'd had, but this was not about dollars anymore. This was about truth. About whether my daughter had been bought with money made clean or with money stained. I told him I would find the money. After I hung up, I sat in the silence. Something shifted inside me. I was not just a father left behind. I was a man with tools. With instincts sharpened by years of balancing numbers and chasing errors others missed. My wife had always said I was too soft with Nora. Maybe she was right. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder. Not for photos this time, but for evidence. I named it simply Whitaker. My fingers steadied as I began collecting what little I knew. Their restaurant business, their lake house, their country club memberships, things I had overheard from Nora but never cared to remember until now. The ache in my chest was still there, raw and heavy, but beneath it, a colder feeling grew. A focus, a purpose. If Nora had chosen them because of their wealth, then she deserved to know what kind of wealth it truly was. I whispered to the empty room, as if my wife could hear me. "All right. Love, let's see what kind of family they really are." Sam moved fast. By noon, he sent a secure link and a list of what he needed. Full names, home and business addresses, any emails I had seen on Nora's phone. I pulled what I could from old messages and from the guest list she had left on my table. I typed slowly so I would not make mistakes. When I pressed send, my hands finally stopped shaking. The next days fell into a rhythm. Mornings I worked service calls. Afternoons I opened public records and read until the screen hurt my eyes. County property files showed the Whitakers bought a lake house in cash last year. The deed was signed on a Tuesday. 2 days earlier, their restaurant had posted week sales. I searched the state registry. Whitaker Hearth Hospitality, LLC. 2 managing members. One name led to a mailbox store. Another linked to a shuttered event company with no website and a phone that rang once then died. I wrote every detail in a notebook. Dates. Sums. Cross streets. I made a copy of each page and left the packet with my neighbor Irene. At night, Sam called with his voice low like we were in a library. He had pulled vendor lists, delivery invoices, and monthly deposit summaries. "Something is off," he said. "Their food orders do not match the revenue they report. On paper, they buy enough to serve 300 covers a night. On the tax return, they report half. Either they waste food by the truckload, or the numbers are dressed up." He sent scans. I put on reading glasses and went line by line. There were credits from a catering company formed 6 months earlier. Its address was a storage unit. There were deposits split into many small sums under the threshold that triggers automatic bank reports. The pattern was neat. Too neat. It repeated on the 15th and the 29th every month, like someone had learned the safe days to move cash. I made a spreadsheet of my own. I color-coded deposits. I added a column for each shell company Sam found. I added another for the days I knew the restaurant hosted a big event from social media posts. The numbers refused to match. On a Saturday with weddings and live music, the declared sales were modest. On a Tuesday with no photos and an early closing sign, large deposits appeared. It looked like someone had switched labels to hide the flow. Sam flagged a new thread. 2 servers had left within weeks of each other. One filed an unemployment claim that included a note. Paid cash shift. No tips reported. The other had posted a late-night message about being asked to carry envelopes to the office. No receipts. No records. Heat rose in my chest that was part anger and part fear for my daughter who saw only the glossy surface. I went to the county clerk to request liens and permits. The printer whirred behind the glass. The clerk slid papers toward me. There was an old notice about a failed inspection. Then a different address tied to the same tax ID. A warehouse on the edge of town. When I drove past later, the bay doors were down. A sign. A man with a clipboard watched my truck turn around and did not wave. At home, I printed everything and built a binder. I numbered sections. Corporate filings. Property records. Bank patterns. Vendor anomalies. Staff notes. I wrote a table of contents on the first page like I used to do for audits. I slipped a photo of my daughter into the front pocket so I would remember why I was doing this when the work felt heavy. On the 3rd evening, Sam spoke more firmly. I can connect 3 fake vendors to the same person. The person is a cousin of Elaine. He is listed as a manager at the warehouse you found. He has a prior case for fraud that was dismissed. It explains the structure. It does not prove everything, but it draws a map. I asked him what happens next. He said, "We do not run to anyone yet. We document. We look for the clean shot that no one can argue." He asked if I could sit inside the restaurant without being noticed. I told him I could if I wore a plain jacket and minded my own business. He reminded me not to take risks. I promised, though my promise tasted thin. If danger stood between my daughter and the truth, I would face it. I drafted a simple letter in case something happened to me. It named Sam. It named the binder. It named the agencies that should receive it. I scheduled it to send to Irene if I did not cancel it each morning. Fathers do odd things when they feel their child is standing on the edge of a hole. That night I organized the last scans and backed them up to 2 USB drives. I put one in the freezer behind a bag of frozen peas. I taped the other under a shelf in the garage. The house was quiet except for the hum of the old furnace I keep running by habit. My wife used to say, "Truth is a slow river. It finds the low places and fills them in time." I whispered that I could wait. By midnight, the binder was full. My hands were steady. The ache inside me was still there. But now there was something else beside it. Not joy. Not yet. A clean breath. A line crossed from helpless to ready. I closed the binder and set it on the table. Tomorrow I would walk into their world and start watching. I switched my phone to silent on a Friday morning and left it that way. For years I had answered Nora's calls within minutes. Even when I was waist-deep in a furnace or halfway across town on a job. But now I wanted to see what would happen if I became unreachable. By noon, there were 5 missed calls. By the end of the day, 14. I wrote each one down in my old banking ledger. Date. Time. Duration. Caller. It was a habit drilled into me from decades of audits. Document everything. The first voicemail still carried her sharp edge. "Dad, You're being stubborn. Just call me back so we can settle this. We need to look like a united family. But by the third call, her tone shifted. Maybe I was too harsh. We should talk. Saturday came with another wave of missed calls. Richard's voice appeared on my screen. He left messages laced with condescension. Mr. Holt. We're men. We should resolve this without drama. Nora is upset. And frankly, so are we. You're not helping anyone by staying quiet. I let the phone buzz on the counter while I mowed the lawn. Each vibration felt like a small victory. They had always held the upper hand. Their money, their confidence, their sense that I was beneath them. But silence unsettled them. By Sunday evening, the desperation was clear. Nora's voice cracked in her 12th message. Dad, please answer. I'm sorry. Okay? I need you there. Logan's parents are saying things I don't like hearing. Just, please talk to me. I wrote the words down exactly as she spoke them. Her apology was raw, but it arrived only after my silence. I couldn't help thinking about what my wife used to say when Nora was a teenager slamming doors. Sometimes the best response is no response. By Monday morning, the log showed 32 calls in 3 days. Elaine had even tried once, her voice smooth and artificial. Daniel, we know this has been difficult for you. Let's put our differences aside for Nora's sake. Families should come together. I almost laughed at the word family on her lips. The ledger filled with lines of ink. Patterns emerged. Morning calls full of hope. Afternoon ones sharp and frustrated. Late evening messages drenched in worry. The longer I said nothing, the more they unraveled. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the binder of evidence beside me. Sam had promised his full report soon. But even without it, I could see the Whitakers beginning to slip. Their voices betrayed cracks I had never heard before. I brewed tea in the old kettle my wife once favored. Steam filled the small kitchen. My phone buzzed again, rattling against the wood. I didn't move to pick it up. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. I looked at my wife's photo and whispered, "The silence is working." Nora called near sunset. Her voice was small. "Dad, Richard wants you at dinner. They think we should clear the air. Please come." I said yes. I wanted to see their world with my own eyes. Whitaker Hearth sits in the old mill district. Glass and steel. A host in a black suit greeted me by name. The dining room glowed with soft light. Rosemary and butter hung in the air. Nora stood by a window table. She looked beautiful and tired. She hugged me like she was afraid to let go. Richard rose with a wide smile. "Daniel, welcome to our little place." Elaine offered her hand like a queen. "We are so glad you came." I sat. I watched. A busser slipped an envelope to a manager by the bar. No receipt. No words. The manager tucked it under a black book and walked to the office. Richard ordered a bottle without looking at the menu. He spoke about brand and community and giving back. He did not ask how I was. Nora tried to fill the gaps. She told me about flowers and music and dresses that cost more than my truck. She laughed without joy and took my hand under the table. Her fingers were cold. Elaine leaned in. "Daniel, this has been a rough patch. You did your best raising Nora. Now, let us handle the big things. That way she will not have to worry." A waiter dropped a leather folder near the place setting behind Richard. He meant to set it on the other table, but missed by an inch. The flap slid open toward me. I saw an invoice from Lakeside Events. It listed a catering deposit for a wedding not on the calendar. The address was a storage unit I had already driven past. The total was split into 4 payments. The dates fit the pattern in my spreadsheet. I shifted my chair to block the view and took out my phone. I used the camera as a mirror so it looked harmless. Then I pressed the shutter once. The sound was lost under the music. I closed the flap and slid the folder back with a napkin. Richard raised his glass. To family. To new beginnings. I touched my glass to his and held his eyes. To getting what we deserve. The chef stopped by and shook hands. Richard told a story about a senator who loved their private room. He winked as if we shared a secret. I excused myself and walked toward the restrooms. On the way, I passed the service hall. The office door sat at the end. It opened as I reached the corner. The manager stepped out with a plastic bank pouch. A man in a cap followed with a rolling case. They did not look at each other. The pouch went into the case. The case rolled away. Inside the restroom, a server washed his hands as if he wanted to scrub off more than soap could reach. He glanced at me in the mirror. "You here with the Whitakers?" I nodded. "Watch their office after 10. He left before I could ask what he meant. When I returned, Nora was telling Elaine about the first dance. She said she had chosen the song her mother loved. Richard changed the subject to golf. He asked if I knew anyone at the club. I said no. He smiled as if that confirmed something he already believed. Another envelope crossed the bar. It went from a woman in a white coat to the same manager. He did not open it. He wrote nothing. He vanished into the office and did not return for a long time. I asked Nora about Logan. She said he was working late. My eyes kept drifting to the office door and to the private room at the back where a small party cheered without end. Each cheer came with a trip to the hallway by a server who never carried plates. Richard looked over the room like a man who had built a city. "The trick," he said, "is to understand flow. You move inventory where it needs to go. You keep numbers lean. You work smarter than the people who make the rules." He said it like a joke. Elaine laughed. Nora did not. I finished my coffee and asked for the check for my side. Richard waved his hand as if I had told a joke that did not land. "Guests do not pay here. Family does not pay." I thought about the men who did pay in ways that never touched a receipt. When we stood, Nora squeezed my arm. "Thank you for coming." Her eyes searched my face for something. Outside, the valet brought my truck. Nora kissed my cheek. Elaine pressed a hand to my shoulder. Richard shook my hand hard and said he was glad we understood each other. I drove around the block and parked with my lights off. I watched the back door. At 10 on the dot, the manager stepped out with 2 pouches and met a car that did not pull into a spot. The cases traded hands. No signatures. No words. The cars split and were gone. I sat in the dark until my hands stopped shaking. I spoke into the voice recorder Sam told me to use. Times. Faces. Movements. I described the invoice and the case and the words Richard liked when he thought he sounded wise. At home, I put the new photos in the binder. I added notes to the ledger. I stood for a long time at the window. Across the street, Irene's porch light glowed. She leaves it on for her son who works nights. A steady light on a quiet block. I touched the frame with my wife's picture. I am not a man who looks for a fight. But my girl was standing in a room built on lies. I could not let her dance there in the dark. Not without knowing. The binder grew heavier with each page. Bank statements. Shell vendors. Notes written in my tight script. By the end of the week, it looked less like a father's desperate project and more like an official case file. I stacked it on the dining room table, cleared of everything else, so I could see what I was building. Sam came by on Tuesday. He set down a thick envelope and rubbed his jaw. "Daniel, this is enough to bury them. Tax fraud, laundering, falsified invoices. You could hand this to the IRS right now and watch the walls come down." I shook my head. It isn't enough that they fall. Nora has to see it herself. She has to understand who she chose. If she doesn't, she'll spend her whole life thinking I ruined her happiness out of spite. Sam frowned. But he understood. He helped me digitize the files. 3 copies on 3 drives. He reminded me to lock one away outside the house. I slipped it into Irene's mailbox across the street, hidden beneath a stack of her gardening magazines. That night, I sat alone at the table, spreading the papers like cards. I arranged them by date, then by company, then by deposit size. Patterns emerged like footsteps on snow. Each step told the same story. Money that didn't exist on paper was carrying them forward in life. The mansion, the club, the BMW Richard drove, the veil Elaine fastened on my daughter's head. I began drafting a letter, not to the IRS, not yet, to Nora, my dearest daughter. I wrote, "You have a right to know who you are trusting." Every line hurt to form. I didn't want to lecture her. I wanted to show her the truth in black and white. I closed with 6 words. "These are your real parents. Love, Dad." I slid the letter into a leather portfolio with the documents stacked neatly behind it. I polished the cover with a rag until it gleamed. This would be my gift to her, wrapped not in ribbon but in evidence. Over the next days, I prepared my insurance. 3 sealed envelopes went to 3 different post offices. Each held a copy of the report and a short note addressed to federal and state investigators. If anything happened to me, the truth would still reach the right desks. By Thursday, I had ironed my best suit twice and polished my old shoes until they looked new. The calendar on the wall glared at me with red ink. Saturday. I pressed my thumb against the date. My heart thudded heavy but steady. The night before, Nora called again. "Dad, I'm so glad you'll be there. Richard says he wants to make peace. Elaine is planning to give a speech about family. Isn't that wonderful?" I smiled into the receiver, though she couldn't see it. "It will be a day to remember, sweetheart." After she hung up, I returned to the portfolio waiting on my dresser. My wife's picture stood beside it. I whispered to her, "Tomorrow she'll finally see, not who I am, who they are." The morning of the wedding broke bright and cold. I pressed my suit one last time, hands steady over the iron. The leather portfolio sat on the dresser like a weight, heavier than its size. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket, over my heart. The church hall glowed with white roses and glass chandeliers. Guests filled the pews in satin and silk, whispering admiration for the Whitakers' generosity. My name was printed on a seat in the 3rd row, behind business partners and golf friends. Father of the bride reduced to an afterthought. When Nora appeared at the back, radiant in lace, my throat closed. Her arm was linked with Richard's. He walked her down the aisle like it was his right. She looked happy, glowing, a child of wealth and power. My chest ached with pride and pain. The ceremony passed with vows, scripture, and applause. Elaine dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, the picture of devoted motherhood. Richard shook hands like a king receiving loyalty. I clapped when the couple kissed, though my palms stung with bitterness. At the reception, the ballroom sparkled with crystal and candlelight. 200 guests lifted glasses to toast. Nora floated from table to table, thanking everyone. She reached mine, hugged me quickly, then spotted the bulge in my jacket. "Dad, did you bring me something?" I pulled the portfolio free. "A gift for your new life. Read it tonight, when you have quiet," she smiled, curious, and tucked it into her bridal bag between lipstick and tissues. Hours passed with toasts and dancing. Laughter swelled. Wine poured. Photographers flashed. At last, Nora reached for her bag. She pulled out the portfolio with a laugh. "What did you give me?" "Dad, open it." "Sweetheart, it's important." She slid out the letter first. Her eyes moved across the words. Her smile vanished. Hands trembling. She turned to the documents, page after page of bank records, false invoices, tax fraud, shell companies. The ballroom quieted as her face drained of color. Jason leaned close. "What is it?" She spread the papers across the head table. Richard's face darkened. Elaine's hands froze. Guests began to whisper. Phones rose to capture every page. Nora's voice cracked. "Is this true? Are you stealing money?" Richard tried to laugh. "Lies. Your father is jealous because he can't provide." I rose from my seat. Voice steady. "No. Richard, I'm showing her who you are. 400,000 hidden from the government. Money laundered through fake catering. Every flower, every glass in this room was bought with stolen cash." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests leaned closer, snapping photos. Elaine reached for the papers, but too late. Evidence lay across the white linen for all to see. Nora's mascara ran down her cheeks. "All of this, my wedding, funded by crime." "Yes," I said quietly, "and I warned the authorities days ago. They'll be knocking soon." The room erupted. Guests shouted, some leaving in disgust, others pressing forward with questions. Richard's face turned purple with rage. "You bitter old man. You ruined everything." "No," I said. "I saved my daughter." Nora buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Jason stared at his parents-in-law like strangers. The Whitakers' empire crumbled in real time. Not in court filings, but in whispers and photographs, shared instantly with hundreds of witnesses. I stood in the storm and felt, for the first time in months, steady. My girl knew the truth. And the Whitakers, who had paraded themselves as saviors, stood exposed as thieves. The band kept playing as if music could fix it. The singer stalled on a long note. Waiters froze with trays in the air. Phones glowed over the head table. Nora stood with trembling hands and wet cheeks. She looked from the papers to Richard and then to me. Her future tilted. Elaine tried to speak. "This is a misunderstanding." She reached for her daughter. Nora pulled away like she had touched fire. Richard barked at the manager. "Get these people out." He turned on me with a smile that had no warmth. "Sit down. Daniel, we will handle this." I did not sit. Guests began asking questions that would not bend. Who signed these invoices? Why do the addresses lead to mail drops? Why are deposits split? Someone filmed Richard's face as he snapped at a server. Another guest called her brother who works in compliance. The word fraud moved through the room. Jason stepped between Nora and his in-laws. He looked at the papers and then at his bride. "Nora, is it true?" She covered her mouth and nodded. Not because she had known, but because she believed the proof in her hands. The photographer kept shooting. Every frame was a record. Elaine grabbed the microphone and talked about grace and family. The sound squealed. The crowd did not quiet. A woman at table 8 said she had been asked to pay cash in the back room. A florist said her invoices had been changed. The Whitakers looked small at their own celebration. Nora slid the papers back into the portfolio and held it to her chest. She turned to me like I was the only solid thing left. "Dad, I am so sorry." The word "dad" broke something in me and fixed something else. I took her hand. We walked through the crowd that parted without being asked. In the corridor, she leaned against the wall and sobbed. I put my jacket over her shoulders. For a moment, she was 12 again, crying over a science fair project that collapsed before judging. I told her the same line I said then. "You are not alone. We will fix what can be fixed." Jason joined us with eyes wide. He said he would drive Nora home. I gave him the portfolio. "Hold on to this. Do not let anyone touch it." He tucked it under his arm like a book. Back inside, Richard blocked my path. You did this. You will pay. I did not raise my voice. The law will decide who pays. A path opened. I took my hat and left him standing in the room he once owned. That night I did not sleep. I watched the window turn from black to gray. At dawn, my phone buzzed. Dad. Can I come over? She arrived with a cardboard box in her arms. Jewelry. Shoes. A velvet clutch. A bracelet that caught the morning light with a guilty shine. I cannot keep any of it. She set the box on the table like an offering and cried into her hands. I poured tea the way my wife used to. Honey. A slice of lemon. A napkin folded small. I am ashamed, she said. I erased you. I called you Dan to fit their world. Her voice broke on world. I told her that shame is heavy, but can be carried together. I told her I loved her more than my pride. We opened old photos until the light changed on the floor. The gym dance. The ribbon in her hair. The planetarium ticket. She smiled through tears and said she could still hear the voice naming the stars. By afternoon, she had stopped shaking. She asked hard questions. What happens now? Will they go to prison? Will people believe us? I answered what I could. Sam would forward the file. I had already mailed copies. The truth moves slow, but it moves. Jason texted that the restaurant had closed early. Trucks came. People were talking. I felt sorry for the staff who only wanted a shift and a paycheck. Nora asked me something I did not expect. Will you walk me down the aisle when we do this for real? No gowns that cost a month's rent. No stage lights. Just us. A small room. A simple vow. My throat tightened. I nodded and she cried again and laughed at her own tears. Before she left, she took a breath. I chose money over love because I was afraid. Afraid of not having enough. Afraid of being ordinary. I told her ordinary is where love lives most days. In paid bills. In fixed furnaces. In dinners that are warm when the house is quiet. I carried the box to her car. She hugged me like she did when she was small and her feet left the ground. She held on longer than any goodbye in years. Thank you for telling me the truth even when it hurt. After she drove off, I stood by the curb with my hat in my hand. I felt tired, but there was air in my chest that had been missing. Inside, the house did not feel as silent. I washed 2 cups and left them to dry. I sat down and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I believed we might be all right. The phone buzzed again. It was Sam. He had filed the reports. The agencies were moving fast. Stay careful, he said. I told him my daughter had come home to herself. He said that was the best line he had heard all year. I set the phone aside and looked at the photo on the mantel. My wife seemed to smile in a way that reached the corners of her eyes. I said out loud to a room that was not empty anymore. She is safe. 5 days after the wedding. News broke on the local channel. Federal agents had seized boxes of records from the Whitaker's restaurant and shut the doors with paper notices taped across the glass. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering into their phones. The family who had spent years parading their generosity was now paraded on the evening news as suspects in fraud and laundering. I sat in my chair and watched the footage. Richard kept his chin high while agents guided him past cameras. Elaine covered her face with a scarf, but it did not hide the panic in her eyes. My phone buzzed non-stop with calls from reporters. I did not answer. Some victories do not need interviews. Nora came to me that evening with Jason at her side. She carried no designer purse, no sparkling jewels, only a simple cardigan and eyes swollen from crying. She sat on the couch and whispered, "Dad, I can't believe I chose them." I pulled her close and told her the truth she needed most. You chose wrong once. That doesn't mean you'll choose wrong forever. We spent hours looking through the albums spread across the table. Birthdays with homemade cakes. Christmas mornings with paper crowns. Vacations where we slept in cheap motels but laughed until midnight. Jason listened quietly, seeing a life not built on stolen money, but on love, stretched thin and never broken. When Nora finally lifted her head, she asked me again, "Will you walk me down the aisle at the real ceremony? No stage, no lies, just a promise." My throat closed. I nodded. Of course I will. Weeks later, the day came. No chandeliers, no hundreds of guests, only a small chapel. Friends who mattered, and light through the windows. Nora wore a modest dress, her hair pinned back the way her mother once wore it. She slipped her arm through mine and whispered, "This feels right." I whispered back, "Because it is." When we walked, it was not about money or power. It was about steps taken together. Jason's vows were simple. Nora's voice broke when she promised to hold him through joy and sorrow. I gave her hand away, but not my place in her life. That had finally been returned to me. After the ceremony, we shared cake baked by a neighbor and toasted with sparkling cider. There was laughter, and there were tears, but none of them were poisoned by shame. Nora leaned against me, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Dad, for loving me enough to hurt me with the truth." I held her hand and felt the weight of years lift. My wife's photo stayed in my pocket, close to my heart. I whispered to it later when the house was quiet again. She found her way back. The Whitakers faced their charges in court. Their empire collapsed. Their names dragged through headlines they could not buy. But I did not follow the details. Justice would take care of itself. What mattered to me sat at my kitchen table again, sipping tea, calling me Dad, and laughing at old stories. Life became ordinary once more. Work, chores, dinners with my daughter. Ordinary. The place where love lives. And for the first time in years, I was grateful to be nothing more and nothing less than that.